I haven't shown you guys before, have I? I feel like I can't remember. Okay, so this is a map of who's controlling the world, basically. And if we think about in 1900, so like have that as our drop year, 85% of the countries in the world were under either direct control of Europeans or people of European ancestry, right? So people who did things in a European way. They spoke a European language, they had European ideas, they had European styles. And so you can look at that. Of course, that's America, right? Because we were so influenced, especially by the founding of the British. South America is all Spain and Portugal. Um, Britain still controls Canada and Australia and South Africa at this time, although South Africa is independent like in 1901. But anyway, they've controlled a ton of Africa, which is what we'll talk about today. Obviously, all of Europe is itself European. Anyway, it's just kind of this massive footprint. And that's what imperialism is. Imperialism is this idea of going out and taking over another country or region, area, because it's not always a country. Like if you go over to take over like a big piece of Africa, it's not necessarily a place that was controlled by one group before. But so what we see is a rise of Europeans and Americans to a smaller extent, but still Americans, Westerners kind of going out and taking over. And I think the first thing that we want to figure out is why, like what are they doing? This is a great artifact, I think. This is a piece of wallpaper, which I still want to envision like who puts this up in their bathroom. Like I don't really understand. I'm not sure where it went. But if you look at it, I'm going to walk over to show the class. But so Queen Victoria is the Queen of England. And here she is, like with all the places she's so proud of ruling. So you can see Canada down here. It almost looks like she's scooting with a bear, but I don't think she is. But anyway, we've got kind of like the coldness of Canada. We've got Australia and the kangaroo. We've got Africa and the ostrich Cape Colony in South Africa. And here, if I move this, there's a tiger and elephant from India. And so part of being British in this time period, let me just close this so people can, in the class, can see a little better. So part of being British in the 19th century was also about being part of an empire, right? And that's part of what this wallpaper tells us. And I think when we think about motives here, we have to think kind of in a lot of different levels because, maybe you're not the one who's actually going out taking over Africa, right? But if you're the one with this wallpaper, you're proud of that connection. And so the idea of kind of affiliating with that, like running off some of the prestige from that, I think is part of the attraction as well. So what I wanted to do today, and it depends how much you guys have read yet. I know I've read some people's comments. If you hadn't done by last night. So we have 3 readings in perusal that were kind of hopefully done by today, for sure done by the end of the week. And this is Jules Ferry, who is the Prime Minister of France, and it's a debate on the French floor. And it really reminds me of some of the debates that must have also happened in the French Revolution, that you have them yelling at each other and disagreeing. I think it's a really helpful way to get at motives. There's also another poem. So many poems this unit. You guys are going to lose your minds. The White Man's Burden by Rudyard Kipling, who's British but raised in India. So he's like white British, but he has a lot of culture from India. And then Mark Twain, the American. So those 3 readings kind of give us a window into trying to figure out what is going on here. So maybe I can let you guys speak up. Maybe the classroom first or the Zoom. I know it's tricky because like I have my book here, so I can like turn to the page and see what I've underlined. I know you guys aren't that way, but maybe take some notes and then go back in perusal and identify these also. So what motives do you notice? Why are Europeans and Americans going out in the world? What are they looking for? Say it again. Power. Riley says power. I think absolutely that's really important, right? Power. Kind of how would going out in another country, taking over another country, show your power or exhibit your power? Yes. Economic benefits. You're such a good Marxist, right? So that's the very first thing, right? Is this economic benefits? And by Marxist, I don't mean communist, right? Remember, Marx has also got a theory of history that says things happen for economic motives. And so Riley says for power, you go out and take over another place, and now you have access to their stuff, right? You have access to their resources. Absolutely. What other economic motives could there be, or what other ways could you talk about economics?
Labor force.
People, yeah, tell me more. Charles Koch says labor force.
The people you subjugate are now they're colonized by you. So now they work for you. So if you put them to work in those resources. Now you just have a larger workforce.
That's a great point. So Charles, sorry people in the room couldn't hear, but Charles is saying if you take over another people, now you control the people, right? So it's not slavery in the way we talked about the African slave trade, but it's not that far removed, because you've got these people and you can say, now here's this job. Everybody go work in the diamond mines for me. Everybody go farm rubber trees, right? You've got access to this whole new labor force. And so you can put them to work to things that benefit you and what you want to have done. Absolutely. Anyone else with other economics? I'm trying to figure out how to get out of this shade here, but I don't see how to do it. Sorry. Excellent. New trade routes. Okay, this is really important to think about. And this is the reason that I pair industrialism and imperialism together, because I can't imagine a world where people are going out into the world because they want more trade, right? So they want both the trade, like the natural resources to fuel the industrial revolution, but they also really want a place to sell all the crap that their factories are making, right? Like, not to be crass about it, but if you've got a factory with a spinning jenny or a power loom, or the steam engine that is going 24 hours a day, and you're making cotton cloth, you got to have somewhere to sell it. People in Britain can only buy so much cloth, right? Like that after that. And so in a lot of these places with imperialism, and it depends on the place. Some places are direct control. So like when the British take over India in the 1850s, they start having direct control over India. So they say to India, you can never buy cloth from France. You can never buy cloth. You can't even make your own cloth. We're going to take the cotton that you're harvesting, ship it back to England, let the factory spin it into thread and then material, and then we're going to sell it back to you. And that's how you can buy clothes, right? And so there's a lot of direct control there for their markets. Other places are going to be a little bit less direct control. The British in China, for example, they don't take over China. They don't become governors of China, except like in a few small places like Hong Kong, but they don't, but they make deals, right? Like, you guys will only trade with us, right? Like, don't trade with France, don't trade with Holland, don't trade with the Netherlands, right? So it can be like it can range, but all of it is really a lot about trade. I think that's such an important point to bring up. Anyone else at home have opium wars? Yes, Charles, I see your chat. Absolutely, yeah, because the Chinese don't want anything the British are selling. So the British brilliant solution is, well, then we'll just get you addicted to opium. This is in the 1830s. There's 2 rounds of opium wars in China. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. This is like an official government plan. We'll sell opium, and then the Chinese government says, stop selling us opium. You're getting our people addicted to it. You're ruining our economy and our labor force. You're killing our people. They even make smoking opium a death penalty offense. And still, the people are addicted to opium. They're not going to stop. And so at one point, they sink a ship full of opium. And the British get so mad, they send in the Navy, like an actual official, like attack by Britain, saying, you cannot blow up a British ship. Even if we're selling something that's against your laws, you cannot stop us. Like a giant mafia navy or something, right? They show up and they lose. The Chinese lose, the British win. And so China, which is the best, most strongest place in 1500, the 1800s, they've fallen too far behind. They haven't had industrialization. They haven't had the scientific method. And so now they can get bullied by Britain. And so Britain makes them sign unfavorable treaties. And then a second one breaks out, and an even more unfavorable treaties for the Chinese. That's a side story, but it's not really. It's really part of this whole story. This wasn't one of the featured case studies. Okay, so we have a lot of economic reasons. We also have political reasons. Some of them I think you can't get from the readings. But some of them I think you can. So as you read, kind of try to identify, right? Like, where are these people talking about economic motives, where they're talking about political motives? So I kind of gave a lot of words away there, but what do we mean by political motives? What would be some examples, maybe in the reading, if someone's done it yet, of the political motives? But in the French debate, Jules Ferry he's talking about how it's so important. He says it's so important that we go, because if we don't go, if we don't become a great imperial power, right? You can imagine, you haven't done the reading yet, but what's the argument going to be? If France doesn't go and take over North Africa, then what? Someone else is, right? And then they're going to be important, and we're not going to be important, right? So this competition, remember we've talked about Europe before as like sibling rivalry, and that's absolutely still in play here. Everything we don't get, Britain's going to get. Everything we don't get, Belgium's going to get. And this is why Germany and Italy, they're so late to the game, because they're not even countries, right, until 1870, 1871. And so they're going to be hustling in the 1870s and 80s to try to cobble together an empire because they want to say, no, we're a great European power too. And so we have this competition, prestige, nationalism, patriotism. If you want France to be great, I mean, the way Jules Ferry talks about it, right? Like at the very end, he's like, France should carry everywhere her language, her customs, her flag, her arms, and her genius, right? Like this is really a project about French greatness. This is, and so that's sort of a political sell about how important France is going to be. What else, Riley? Yes. 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 Yeah, Riley, that's such a good point. So, Riley, I mean, I think in a way we're kind of getting to the this idea of this cultural motive, right? Which I think some of these are kind of bleed into each other. But Riley was talking about those of you at home about the white man's burden, which I think I copied a little bit of in the next page. I didn't do the whole thing, and I want you to look at the whole thing. It's an old-fashioned language. It's a little bit hard to get at. And I noticed some people in perusal, it might have been more the other class than yours, were like, I don't understand how this is defending imperialism. But Riley's onto something saying that the idea is you guys are barbarians. Other people that aren't European or American are barbarians. Therefore, we have to help them. I mean, it's a little bit of a fake sell. I'm not having you read this poem because I think it's true. Please, please understand that. Let's look at this first verse here, right? What is he? What is it? What's the message here? What words stand out at you? What's his message? Yeah, the word duty for sure, right? The white man's burden is all responsibility. And duty's a big deal, especially everywhere. Like in the 19th and 20th century, they have honor and duty. Like, what is your obligation? What is your responsibility to the world? We're a little bit less focused on that now, and I'm not sure this is probably okay to leave behind, but other aspects of honor and duty, I think we've kind of lost a bit. Um, yeah. What does it mean, send your sons to exile? What's he saying to the readers? How does imperialism happen? Yeah, you got to have all these college graduates go from England and be willing to go live in India, just like Kipling's father does. Kipling's father raises kids in India, has kids in India, right? And goes and moves. You've got to say, you can't come back to the family neighborhood or family business, whatever. Go do this other thing. And so sending your sons into exile, and he's sort of exaggerating, but exile meaning they have to leave. They have to leave Britain. There's a whole group of people, father, son, who go and live in Britain. Maybe the kids get older, they send them back to England for school. Maybe they come back. How does he describe these people? Because Riley's right to say he thinks of them as barbarians. How do we know that? People on Zoom, what do you guys see? Yes, thank you. Charles says half devil and half child, right? Neither one of those is a very nice way to talk about somebody, right? Unless it's a 5-year-old mischievous little kid or something, right? But these are not. These are adults in their own society. This is in the Philippines that America's taken over. And he's celebrating this and saying this needs to happen. You're new caught, right? So meaning we've just now shown up there, but they're sullen, right? And then this is I skipped a stanza, the third stanza. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard, right? So this is a burden that's like Rudyard Kipling is celebrating like the bravery of these mostly young men who are leaving their comfortable life in England or America and going to a foreign place, even though everybody hates them, right? Even though they get there and people blame them for what goes wrong, right? You're bettering them, you're improving their conditions, and they hate you, right? You're trying to guard them and protect them. Well, maybe they hate you, right? Because you shouldn't be there. But like that's not what he's really talking about. The problem is not that the white man is there, right? What he's doing is saying this is such a responsibility that we have to go out in the world. That map with the go out in the world and take it over because our civilization is so great, right? We have the Sistine Chapel, we have Michelangelo, we have the Renaissance, we have the Enlightenment, right? We have the scientific method, we have all these amazing things. Everybody has got to. We have Christianity, right? There's a religious aspect also, not in the readings you have here, but to some other people. Not everybody falls for this, and I think it's important to remember that even though this is a widespread policy of almost every European country and to some degree America in this time period, There are voices in the Jules Ferry debate, and Mark Twain is another voice. What is the criticism of the imperialist project that we see even made at the time, even in the 1880s and 1900s? All right, when you read, look for the criticism, because I think that's important to see. Mark Twain's entire thing is a criticism. I mean, he's especially taking on this idea of economic motives. I mean, I think in a way he's taking on Marx to say, if everything's economic, that's pretty awful, right? Because we're really going to justify what we're doing economic wise. And then Jules Ferry too. There's a couple of really good debates. Make yourself a note to look. I should have printed it out. But anyway, there's a part where it kind of becomes like debate back and forth. It's not just the prime minister talking, and he says. The Prime Minister of France, Jules Ferry, says, I must speak from a higher and more truthful plane. It must be stated openly that, in effect, superior races have a right over inferior races. Okay? This is a very bold comment, and it comes out of this cultural phenomenon of social Darwinism, which Darwin had published, and Darwin's also in your reader, but it's not us reading I assigned, because we don't have enough time in the world. But if you want it, you have access to it. You can scroll back through. You guys can read more than what I've assigned. There's a brief thing from On the Origin of Species in chapter 8 of your book. In 1859, somebody just really quickly give us a summary of Darwin's theory of evolution, which is not the same as social Darwinism. Charles, are you going to unmute? Or no, you're typing. Okay, so Charles says survival of the fittest, which I'm so glad you said that, because that's a great link to social Darwinism. That's actually not really Darwin. That phrase is not Darwin's. That phrase, I mean, it's a way to explain Darwin, but that phrase is Herbert Spencer's. So tell me, maybe unmute and just tell us a little bit more about what that means, survival of the fittest. Do you guys know that phrase, survival of the fittest? Okay.
So just the Darwinistic one, not not social Darwinism.
Thank you. Yes.
Survival of the fittest, meaning the creature best suited to the environment, able to survive and pass on their genes. So not specifically strongest, just whatever works. So maybe smartest, stealthiest, whatever has the best probability of surviving, being able to pass on their genes.
Excellent. And Andrew's adding on, species adapt over time for their environmental conditions. Charles says it doesn't mean you're the strongest necessarily, right? It means that you are the most adaptable to whatever your certain circumstances are. And the creatures that adapt, the individual creatures make the whole species adapt, right? Because if it's better to have a long beak to get seeds out of a certain place in an island, eventually only the birds that have those kind of beaks are going to survive, because all the other birds with the shorter beaks are going to have died. So over time, the birds' beaks will change. Over time, like tens of thousands of millions of years, like not in a generation. So part of it is thinking about the idea of competition, and I think in part because of the world Darwin's living in, his ideas get applied culturally, which Darwin himself is not a social Darwinist, but this idea of competition and this idea that there's just not enough winners in the world. Someone's got to die off. Someone with a short beak, or the slower tiger, or the giraffe with the shorter neck, right? Whoever it is. And so 19th century liberals, you can see how this could be a fascinating idea. Like I mentioned Samuel Smiles last class, who wrote the Arkwright thing that you read in Perusal, the biography of Arkwright. But he basically is like, sorry, widows and orphans, like bad luck. We can't save everybody. Like if we spend all our resources trying to save you, our society's not going to survive. So like, oh well. And he doesn't want to kill them or anything. He's just not really worried about that as a problem society has to solve. Only the fit survive. That's not you, sorry, right? And so you have the same idea to other nations, the same idea to other races, the same idea to other, however finely tuned you want to carve out the human family. And it's like, look, obviously the British are meant to survive. We're the fittest because we have the biggest guns. So we can sail into China and blow them up. And that means we're supposed to survive. Sorry, China, bad luck. Like you guys didn't adapt. So the burden's not on us. It's like, it's almost scientific that you're falling apart. It's really not our responsibility that we showed up with gunboats. Similar idea you can imagine kind of playing out everywhere. So Jules Ferry stands on the floor of the legislature, right, of the French National Assembly, and says, superior races have rights over inferior races. Wow. But in response, right away, someone says, "You dare to say that in the country which has proclaimed the rights of man." And again, we get back to the 79 Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, the debates over slavery, the debates over women. Like, what do you mean? Like, how could it be if all races are, if all humans are equal, then how could superior have rights over inferior? That's anti-revolutionary. And so they get in this debate here. And I think it's important to see that and kind of think about everybody's not on board even at the time, even though overwhelmingly the government still do it, right? So just think about the fact that the way they take that on. So look that over and any other questions or comments? Okay, I just want to zoom in on Africa. In a perfect world, I used to have like 4 days on imperialism, and we could do like a day on Japan, a day on China, and a day on Africa, and a day on India. And there's just so much else I want to cover, so we're kind of squishing it all in. But rather than giving you like 10 minutes on everything, I want to zoom in mostly on Africa and next class on Japan. This is really, really different stories. Africa's not a country, so in a way that's not very nice of me to say like Africa. But I think the Scramble for Africa, it's called, let me make this smaller so people can see, there we go, in the classroom. The Scramble for Africa happens in the 1880s. And it's a nickname that historians give to this movement. And it's a way to think about how imperialism really happens and kind of what's going on here. And this goal of creating an empire, right, driven by the Industrial Revolution, driven by almost this Enlightenment idea of progress, right, driven by the innovation and technology of new inventions, driven by wanting new markets. And so European countries are deploying their resources kind of more effectively than ever before. You know, like surgical precision, military, industry, commerce, right, trade, government, right, and so they're really kind of striking out strategically at all these places. And so they want to control these territories, like I said before, in differing ways. And I think it's helpful that this map has lots of different colors because it's not one story about Africa. And we'll zoom in on South Africa at the very end of the semester. I think that's our last class day and think about what's going on. But you can see from this map that basically all the European countries of any significant wealth and clout are playing. So Britain is pink. So you can see they have a lot of land. Britain kind of has a dream of being able to run a railroad from Cape Town to Cairo. They've got a little bit in the way here, right? But they want a straight shot all the way up. France obviously was red. They've got a ton of area here. The Portuguese have a couple places, even Portugal, right? Like still play what? How did Portugal get here? Italy, we'll talk about, they're trying to play here as well. Belgium has the Congo. So everybody's involved. And one of the things I really like about this map is that it shows you where everybody local rose up against them. This is a story, obviously, of resistance. This is a story of people saying, actually, we don't want to be controlled by the French or by the British or whoever. So you have a sense this is not something that's just taken down lightly. I've got a couple of just text responses that I wanted to just show you guys, just to hear some African voices. So you're not only hearing, like, I think you have to hear British and American voices to get the motives, but then what does it feel like from the other end? And this is an African chief describing a battle in 1877 on the Congo River against British and African mercenaries. So he's looking back 30 years later. Is that right? 87, 97? Yeah. And he describes it. And still those bangs went on. The long sticks spat fire, right? Like they wouldn't know what a gun was, right? So the long sticks. Pieces of iron whistled around us and fell into the water with a hissing sound. And our brothers continued to fall. We ran into our village and they ran after us. We fled into the forest and flung ourselves on the ground. When we returned that evening, our eyes beheld fearful things. Our brothers dead, bleeding. Our village plundered and burned, and the river full of dead bodies. You call us wicked men, but you white men are much more wicked. You think because you have guns, you can take away our lands and our possessions. You have sickness in your heads, for this is not justice. And so just to get the sense, right, of this legacy, every single place except 2 is taken over. We'll talk about Ethiopia in a minute. The other place that isn't taken over is Liberia. And Liberia remains independent because it's a protected place by the United States. It's affiliated with the United States. It was a place for former slaves to go back, like a homeland. And so it's off limits for the Europeans. They can't take it over. But everywhere else is taken over. And I think this tells us that if Europeans want you, they're going to get you, right? They're going to show up. And if this is important to them, right, they're going to stay, they're going to fight it out and take it over. This is a document from the Royal Niger Company, which is a British affiliated um, institution to administer and develop the Niger River Delta area. And so it's from 1866. And so you got like almost like a waitress's pad of paper. I'm picturing where you like tear one off everywhere you go. You've got the standard document that you're supposed to take around and get all the local people to sign. So imagine this. Okay, here's what you're presented with as someone from Africa who lives in the Niger Delta region. We, the undersigned chiefs of blank, with a view to bettering our community and people, do this day see to the Royal Niger Company forever the whole of our territory extending blank, right, however many miles or to what place. We pledge ourselves not to enter into any war with other tribes without the sanction of the said Royal Niger Company. The company bind themselves not to interfere with any of our native laws or customs consistently with the maintenance of order and good government. The company agrees to pay native owners a reasonable amount for any portion they may require to pay the chiefs blank measures, so a certain other special payment for the chiefs, right? We fixed our marks of our own free will and consent. Done in triplicate, which means they have to sign 3 of them on this day in 1880 something. What does this document tell us about what's going on and how imperialism works, at least in the Niger Delta, but probably everywhere else? That's such a good phrase, forced consent, right? I mean, just the fact that it says that we do this freely makes me think they're not doing it freely, right? Like, I was like, you don't have to say I'm doing this freely unless you want to prove later you weren't. What else? Do you guys in the back have any ideas? What are the options that these people have? What if you say no, I'm not signing it? I think they're going to take it over anyway, right? So now what's the benefit? Like, what draws you to signing it? What are the benefits of signing it? Well, you yourself get some money, right? And you're allegedly protecting your people. But I think we can imagine also like who's signing this. Like, have they just, like, if someone walks in randomly onto Georgia Southern, it's like, who's in charge here? And I'm like, me. I'm in charge. I'll sign it. Give me the payment, right? Even though really I'm not in charge, right? So I think, are these really all signed by the chiefs? Who are they dealing with? Some rogue element. Like, we don't even know for sure that these people are deputized or in some way actually affiliated or really can represent their people. People on Zoom, do you guys have responses or comments about the document? Okay. So one more, I think. Yeah. So the last one is an Ashanti leader, British officer says, we'd like to make a relationship with you and you become a protector. So like I said earlier, there's different ways imperialism works. So somebody has direct control, like in India, we're directly going to control you. We're going to be the governors. You're going to speak English. We're going to send our troops here. We're in charge now. And then there's like indirect control and there's protectorates, meaning like you're affiliated with me, meaning you can't trade with Italy anymore. You can only trade with me, but you're not completely necessarily direct controlling. So Britain has offered a protectorate status. And here's the answer. The suggestion that Ashanti in its present state should come and enjoy the protection of Her Majesty the Queen of England and Empress of India is a matter of very serious consideration. I'm pleased to announce that we have arrived at the conclusion, and that my kingdom of Ashanti will never commit itself to any such policy. Ashanti must remain as of old, at the same time friendly with all white men. So what is Prempeh trying to do here? Say it again. Yeah, stay independent, right? And try to say thank you, but no thank you, right? Like, I appreciate all the benefits you've offered me, but in fact, we don't want to do this. That's not going to be easy to pull off, of course, right? And in the end, they're going to have to sign. But in the end, it's not going to work. In the end, you're going to end up kind of where we started, right? That it's like, sign this document, make this treaty, make this agreement, or we'll shoot you. And I think ultimately that's the kind of threat behind all of these different arrangements. So that's sort of how it feels from the African side, with some voices. From the European side, we have maybe a different view, and these are 2 games. One is Spanish, and one is French. So what do we see from these? I think these are really interesting historical objects to think about games as a document. What do you see going on here? comments on the game. And you can see here where you start, right? You start here at this ship, you get out, and like, it's like you roll the dice or something, and you're rolling along. Look, what is it like to go to Africa according to this game? What are you going to find in Africa? What are some of the things you see on this? Oh, this would have been a good exam question. Maybe I should have saved it for that. I feel like, what do you got? Not in a mean way, but I think there's a lot to say here. There's a lot of room for interpretation. What kind of animals do we see? Yeah, exotic animals, right? You see giraffes here, lions here. Can you guys see that? People on Zoom at home. Um, it's exciting to go to Africa. It's an adventure to go to Africa, right? I mean, the same way I don't know if you guys dream of going on a safari. I'd love to go on a safari, right? Like a photo safari, obviously. But I think the camel, right? The excitement. You're in a new place. The sun is shining. It's all going to be good. It's all happy. Except sometimes you have adventures, right? You have scary adventures. Sometimes the natives come after you, like they're doing over here. Sometimes you got to get in a little bit of a battle, right? So we have these wild ostriches, running towards you. Here we have the Europeans fighting with the locals, right? So we have some violence. We have some excitement. Mostly we have this visit to a primitive, quote, primitive land, right? A nature place, a place for adventure. And you can watch different kinds of people. Look at all the different kinds of people there are, right? You get to visit all different kinds of cultures and people, different kinds of architecture. I mean, it's going to be this exciting game. Imperialism is a game. Imperialism is fun for people back in Europe, right? The way they're looking at it. This is another one from Spain, and it's the same kind of idea here, right? So we have like Spanish Moors. We have Spanish people with their guns and their kind of more modern military style, Western style fighting against locals, the Moors. And this idea of kind of revisiting, right? This cultural, racial, competitive game. I think it's interesting when you think about motives to think about how they see it that way. Here's the cover of a French magazine, and this is the French commander after a battle with Britain. They come almost to blows, and then in the end they end up with a treaty. So what do we see here, right? How are we portraying these different people, the commanders, the troops? What does this tell us about kind of the image of what does it mean to be involved in the imperialist project in Africa? Any thoughts?
He's centered, so he's very pronounced.
Good. Charles says he's centered. Yeah, we can do like art history look at it, right? Visually, he's the main character here, right? But what's going on around him? What's between his feet? Dead North African. And we can see different kinds of Africans, right? So this might be someone we might consider more Arab, like somebody maybe from North Africa, like Morocco, or this is somebody darker, maybe more from Senegal. So we've got the collection of people coming under the French flag. They're all fighting for France. Again, maybe not by choice, but we see this. We're going to see the local people in Africa fighting in World War I and World War II. They're going to get drafted. They're going to get sent to Europe. They're going to get sent. They're going to send away to help fight for France. They're going to be part of France. Other kind of thoughts about the messages here. Is this pro or anti-imperialism? Pro? Yeah, right? Even though there's death, again, it's still this idea of like an adventure. The flag flying in the background, that's the flag that's invented in the Revolution. Before that, French flag had been white. That's the revolutionary flag. The tents, the adventure, you can imagine maybe you're like 12 or 13 years old and you're like, oh, tell me more. Like this looks like how cool, right? I can go command all these troops, right? I'm in charge. I'm physically bigger than they are, right? And the idea of Africans fighting on behalf of the colonial powers, right? So maybe this is a good job opportunity. Maybe they're coerced. Maybe they're maybe some of them really believe in it and they're excited to be part of something. Maybe some of them, kind of buy in. I mean, it's hard to know the range of responses. So I just want you to think about different kinds of sources that we could use. This is a British cartoon of Cecil Rhodes. Have you ever heard of the Rhodes Scholarship? It's named after him. And he's a British person. This is that dream I was telling you that he wants to go from Cape Town to Cairo. And again, like this, the white man straddling the continent, the hero, right? The superstar who comes to Africa to make his name. He's holding telegraph wires, so he's got communication. He's also got a gun, right? This idea of lionizing or looking up to these adventurers, look what they can do. The Rhodes Colossus is the title of it, right? So just kind of different ways. The motives for Europeans, there's individual motives, right? There's probably financial motives, there's patriotic motives, there's adventure motives, right? We're kind of seeing all of that in these different kinds of artifacts, and we think about what are the Europeans doing. This one I thought kind of sold visually the themes from the poem, The White Man's Burden. So this is according to their own vision, right? The European vision. Old style transport, by hand, laborious, lots of women and children, making their way through. It's got to take a long time. They've got to have a lot of like detours and hazards in their way. And now the Europeans come, right? And they bring roads, and now everything's more efficient, and they've got cars, right? And they're carving their way through, and they're making a space to improve, to get everyone closer to an industrial standard. And so this kind of myth of like, look at this image, this legendary kind of status of the duty to civilize. I kind of say that like as a sarcastically. I think just like with industrialization, we said there's costs and there's benefits. I think there's absolutely some benefits of imperialism, right? The scientific method is right. Science is good. I think that, you can't be like morally, like science is not my culture, therefore I'm going to reject it. Like that's not a choice, right? So I think a lot of things, more medicines. I think better transport is good, right? You can get, like we talked before with railroads, you get food from one place in the country to another place before there was a famine, right? You could build walls that better protect from monsoons or floods and things like that, right? I think a lot of the improvements are helpful, and they are improvements, right? More bridges, shorter working day, all those things, right? If you can, not have to walk all day long, instead you can go in a car to get to where you need to go. But just like with industrialization, there's real human costs, right? And so the idea that people are losing their independence, they're losing their ability to make decisions for themselves, they're treated like children, half devils and half children, right? They're infantilized. Even in a place like India that Britain controls, you'll see this with Gandhi at the end of the semester when we watch the movie Gandhi. No matter how smart you are, an Indian can never get to the top of society because there's only British people at the top, right? And so there's frustration that like, why can't I, if it's capable, right? Why can't I do it? And so we've got these other sides, these human sides, these sides that are purposely put in. And I think one thing to remember, I'll get to that in a minute. One thing to remember is that if what you're going to say, like when Jules Ferry says, we're going to go out into the world, his dream is take her language, her customs, her flag, her arms, and her genius. He's talking about France. When France takes over Senegal and Tunisia and Morocco, Algeria, right? And they start making all the kids come to learn French school, right? They want to learn French language, they learn French history. What are they going to study in their history class? What are the most famous French things we've studied so far? The Revolution. They're going to study the Enlightenment, right? They're going to read all of this. They're going to read about these ideas. They're going to read the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. They're going to read Olympe de Gouges, the Declaration of Rights of Woman, right? And eventually the jig is going to be up, right? I mean, it's a project that sows the seeds, I think, of its own destruction from the very start. Because if you're so sure France is great, in large part because of the Enlightenment ideas and the revolutions that have led to equality, then you can't subjugate other people forever and teach them how great French values are and not expect them to rise up against you at some point and say, do you mean me? Right? I'm equal too, right? Natural rights must belong to me. And that's not just true for France, right? That's true for America, that's true for Britain, it's true for all these countries. And so even as this project starts, I think we can already see there's going to be an end to it, right? This cannot be a sustainable thing because you can't always treat somebody like half devil and half children when you've been there for generations teaching them if they've learned all the same things that if you've caught them up, now what's your justification, right? And so I think that's where we're going to see when we get into the 1900s, especially after World War II, when all of these colonies get their independence. The last thing I want to say, and then we'll be done, is just this quick story about Ethiopia. And this is actually the picture on our homepage in folio. So if you guys recognize like a slice of it, it's the one I used for there. And this is the picture that was done later. It was done in the 1940s, but it's about the Battle of Adwa in 1896. And Ethiopia, like I showed you on the map, was the one place besides Liberia that isn't conquered in the Scramble for Africa. It's not because no one tried. It's a combination of reasons. One is they had a really good ruler, Menelik II. And you can see Menelik up here under the umbrella with Ethiopian flags. Ethiopia had long been a Christian nation, And their patron saint is Saint George, Saint George and the Dragon. So there's Saint George. They're just presiding over this victory, and we see the Ethiopians on this side. And I'm so interested in her. This is Menelek's wife. She looks amazing. She's like down there on the battlefield on her horse with a gun. She's got a pistol. Like, tell me more. I think we need to research her. So she's down here. They're fighting against the Italians. And what Menelik has done, which is so smart, and then partly this is also because it's a little bit later, right? This is 1896, not 1880s. You know, when this is all happening, he's had a little bit of time to kind of see what's going on around him. So he says to the French, like, look, we really want to keep trading with you guys. The Italians, we think, might take us over. Can we buy guns from you? And they say to the Italians, we really want to trade with you guys, but we're really worried about our self-defense. The French, you know, might attack us. Can you teach us military strategy? Right? So he's able to kind of navigate and then learn and benefit. So when he does finally face the Italians in battle, like, they're not just with spears or something old-fashioned. Like, they've got machine guns, they've got cannons. You know, they're kind of ready to fight. The Italians are a new country, right? They've only been around a generation. I mean, they're obviously, the people are old, but the country, remember, isn't really fully together until 1870. And so this is part of their trying to prove themselves. Look how great we are. And it's really humiliating. They're the only Europeans that lose. They're not able to get Ethiopia. They do actually go back, which is important to remember. I think I wrote the date down. They go back in 1935 with poison gas. And then they do eventually get it in 1935 and 36. And so that's partly why this is a memory in the 40s, because now they have been taken over. It's like, remember that time we won. But in the Scramble for Africa, Ethiopia remains independent, but only because they've done good scheming. They face an enemy that's not quite as organized, and they're a little bit later. But everybody else is taken over. Let me stop my share. People in the classroom, do you guys have any? I mean, yeah, in the classroom, do you guys have any questions? People on Zoom, what questions do you guys have? Okay, so that's our wrap up, and reach out to me if you need me, and I will see you guys on Thursday. Everybody's invited to the classroom, whoever wants to come. Thank you.